We're here at Plumb Place, which is, honestly, I'm gonna say it, it's probably my favorite historical building in Kansas, and I might be biased because it was the first place where I really started doing a lot of history and archival work, but you know what? It's a cool building. So Plumb Place is the family home of the Plumb family, shockingly enough. So Plumb Place has pretty rich history, a lot of family history with it too. So Preston Plumb was actually one of the founders of Emporia. He lived in Ohio during his childhood, but in 1856 he came to Kansas to help with the Free State movement. And then in 1857 he came to Emporia, helped found it, and he founded the Kansas News, which was not spelled like how we spell Kansas. It's actually spelled with a Z in the middle. I don't know why. Yeah, so he founded Emporia. He founded the first newspaper in Emporia, which was really helpful to the Free State movement. He was very much for the Free State movement. Rumors that he might have run guns with John Brown. So, you know, somebody was pretty into the Free State movement, I would say. Anyway, whenever the Civil War broke out, he did join the 11th Kansas Cavalry, where he eventually became a lieutenant colonel. We actually have a saddle downstairs in the basement that was gifted to him by his men, which is pretty cool. So we actually have like that little bit of history from his service in the Civil War. He wasn't just the founder of Emporia. He wasn't just somebody who served in the Civil War. He was also very highly involved in state and eventually federal politics. He served in the Kansas House of Representatives for several years, and then in 1877 he was actually elected to the U.S. Senate. He was actually elected unanimously at one point, which does not happen very often. This was before the population would actually elect senators to the U.S. Senate, so it was usually done by the state legislature. And so he was elected unanimously, which is not something that happens very often, but he was a really popular person by all accounts. Even whenever he was out serving in Washington, he was making sure to like answer people's letters whenever they sent them to him. He got like every single newspaper that I think is humanly possible to get and would read through everything to keep up on the state of things back home to figure out how he could best serve the people. He was actually in the Senate at the time of his death. He died in 1891 as a result of what we suspect was probably a series of mini strokes followed by a big final stroke or heart attack. Of course, you know, I'm not a doctor, I'm not a medical professional, and it's really hard to, you know, diagnose somebody who died over 100 years ago with, yeah, they died of this. But he had definitely been sick for a while before he died, and he eventually died while in office. And everybody was just incredibly sad. Not only were there mourners in Washington, but whenever they brought him back here for burial, there was a massive funeral for him. There were so many people attended that funeral. Beyond Preston being very famous in the community, his family was also very well known in the community. His sister Ellen actually opened up the first bookstore in Emporia. It was very popular for years. It's called Ellen Plum City Bookstore. His brother George was also very prominent in Emporia politics. He served on a lot of like city commissions and such. He was also a spy in the Civil War, which I didn't learn until like a few months ago, so that was really cool. And then Preston's wife Carrie was also very prominent in the community. She actually donated land. The land is actually, it's just over there. Carrie Plumb donated that land, and then it became the Carnegie Library, and then eventually the Lyon County History Center. It's not the Lyon County History Center anymore, but it was for a long time. But beyond that, Carrie Plumb was also very involved in things like women's rights and such. In fact, her house would eventually become a safe haven for women, but that wouldn't be until after her death. It's actually a little bit of folklore. The thing was is that it said that in her will wanted it to become a shelter for women and give it to the YWCA. That's not true. It was actually left to her children, and her children, who knew their mother's wishes, actually donated the house to the YWCA after her death in 1919. Not only did they donate the house, they actually donated money. Her two sons, Preston and Amos, actually donated money to help move their carriage house and get it attached to the house so that it would become a much bigger shelter. The house itself became part of the YWCA after her death in 1921. In the 40s and 50s, it sort of transitioned into the Lyon County Community Center, and then eventually transitioned into what is called Plumb Place, which was a shelter for women, sort of a transitional house where women who were struggling coming out of rehab other such issues, you know, where they didn't have a home, could live here and have a safe space so that they could have a address that they could use for resumes and such, and they could also get like help and counseling with any issues that they might encounter. Unfortunately, Plumb Place did close last year in 2020. It had been struggling financially for several years, and eventually due to COVID and a host of other issues, it did unfortunately close. Quite recently, they actually just had an auction here where they auctioned off all of the items in the building, and they're getting ready to sell the building last I knew. They're not really sure what's going to happen to it. It does need a lot of repairs. It is a very old house, but the goal is to sell it and use all of the money plus that money from the auction to help reestablish the services that Plumb Place did. Not necessarily at Plumb Place itself, but reestablish the services that Plumb Place provided, because Plumb Place was one of the only places in this area that provided the types of services that they did for women in need, such as that counseling, that transitional housing. So losing that was just a huge loss to the community. I don't think a lot of people know as much about the Plumb family as maybe they should, for him being a founder and a U.S. Senator. So the building is actually on the Register of Historic Places. That also limited sort of the things that you can do in regards to it. If you have a building that's on the National Register, oftentimes there are like things that you have to do, like you have to keep it as historically accurate as possible while also, you know, following modern building codes and modern accessibility things as well. I know that there are people working in there, so I understand, like, if I hear things, you know, like, I'm gonna assume it's the people working in there. It could be ghosts. It could be. You know, again, I don't know for sure whether or not ghosts are real. Hello? Yeah. Anyway, I don't know whether or not ghosts are real, but this place for sure, I've had some spooky happenings here. You know, it's always great whenever the person who's interviewing you for the internship position is like, do you believe in ghosts? And you're like, I don't know. And they're like, just something to think about. Yeah, there were some really weird, unexplained stuff that happened here, which is, it's interesting to me. I feel like in some ways Plumb Place is actually more known for like the hauntings that happened here rather than the history itself, because Flint Hills Paranormal has come out and done so many investigations and stuff here, which I have been privileged to be a part of because I do know a lot about the history of the house. Yeah, there have been some spooky things that happened here, like smelling cigar smoke when I shouldn't be smelling cigar smoke. The one time where things were banging on the windows, and there was nothing to bang on the windows. It was just a lot of weird experiences, but we'll get into that later. So this is not what the building originally looked like. It was actually remodeled after Preston's death, which of course, you know, like a lot of houses get remodeled. It's kind of funny actually, they did a lot of remodels on the house throughout the years because they were sort of playing keeping up with the Joneses with the cross house across the street. So yeah, you know, it's funny, you know, neighborhood rivalries, you know, extend all the way back to the 1800s, which I just think is funny, you know, like if they remodel, they remodel, they remodel, they remodel. Probably one of my favorite additions is the library right here. The entrance to the library inside the house has this huge copper door, which is very heavy and very beautiful. This is this really nice copper door that I was talking about. It's massive, it's very heavy. It's a big door. The shelves are actually built in. That was where they kept a lot of Preston's law books and such, because he was admitted to the bar in 1861. So he was not only a senator, not only a founder of Emporia, not only a lieutenant colonel in the Civil War, he was also a lawyer. Just a man of many, many talents. So yeah, that's one of my favorite spots. That's also where I had my very first spooky encounter there was I was working on cataloging a bunch of the books in there, and books that I hadn't touched for a while, like for at least an hour I was working on there, suddenly just fell over. And then more books fell over, and I couldn't explain it. Not the weirdest thing to happen to me in there, but it was definitely weird. And I'm not the only one who experienced it. I would sometimes talk to the residents while I was working there, and they would tell me about experiences that they had. I've had other people who have been there who have had experiences. And again, I've been there for Flint Hills Paranormal. Yeah, so this particular section of building right up here is pretty interesting. So one of the first stories that I was told about in relation to ghosts is one of the board members, I believe it was talking to me about some of the experiences he had, and he said that he just happened to be looking up one day as he was passing by, and in that window, I believe it was right there, he said he saw the face of a little boy looking out, which is weird for numerous reasons. Number one, that is the ballroom up there, so you can't actually go up there without permission. Second, there weren't kids in the building at the time. It was a shelter for women, not for families. However, it should be noted that the Plumbs had 6 children, 5 of whom survived. Their son Thomas passed away at about the age of 2, which sure would be a small boy who might be looking out a window up there. That was also the time where one of my friends and I were up there because I was checking out one of the items in the ballroom, and I just happened to be up there, and we kept hearing banging on the windows that were right there, which there's not anything that can bang on those windows up there. It was very creepy because, again, like, it sounded like somebody was like hitting on the door trying to get in.
That's crazy.
Yeah, right? Like there's nothing up there that could bang on the windows. I was right next to these windows too, so there was no place else that it could have been coming from, but it was absolutely something was banging on those windows. I don't know if maybe like there was a bird or something up there that was trying to get a squirrel maybe, but like it sure did sound like somebody was trying to get in, especially because like that's your fire escape there, so it's not just a window, it's a door. And then here's the ballroom. This is where one of the board members here saw a little boy in the window. And then there's the door that I heard banging on one time. One time while I was on an investigation with Flint Hills Paranormal, I believe I was in the ballroom at the time, and we just heard this shriek. And it could have been from outside, it could have been from somewhere else in the house, but either way, we don't know where that shriek came from.
Can you turn it off if you're in here with us, please? Alright. What was that? What was that?
Yeah, it was unnerving to say the least. I also had residents tell me that on the occasions where they were up in the ballroom, they would see like shadows move where shadows weren't supposed to be. And one of the theories is it is a ballroom, so maybe it's, you know, past people who came up and celebrated. There are a lot of weird angles with the lights, so it could be, you know, just shadows, but I had residents swear to me that what they saw were like shadows of people moving by where there weren't supposed to be. I don't find the ballroom to be the creepiest place in the house, to be honest. I think that that's reserved for the basement, where there's just a pit in the basement. There's also weird vault doors and such. There's trapdoors on the porch. I don't think I showed that. There are trapdoors on the porch, one of which we believe leads to this, there's sort of like a vault down in the basement, and if you go there, it looks like it leads up to the porch, potentially where one of the trapdoors are. I don't know what that would be for, potentially storage and stuff like that. I like the theory that it was for bootlegging during Prohibition, but it was also, you know, the YWCA during the Prohibition, so that would be extra funny if it was bootlegging at the YWCA. I don't think it was, but it's a fun idea. Another reason I don't like the basement is because that was where I first had confirmation that other people had seen things down there. There's actually video footage of what appears to be a ghost cat downstairs in the basement. When I was there, the director called me in and was like, hey, come take a look at this. And if you watch the footage from that camera, you can see a cat sort of appear in one corner of it and then disappear and then reappear. And it was at night, so there was nobody down in the basement. There wasn't anything that really would have like tripped the cameras or anything. So that was pretty weird. That was the first one where I had some weird things happen to me beforehand, but I could write them off. But that one still kind of spooks me to this day, because like it's there. and it's not there, and then it's there again, and it is the exact same thing, and there's not really a reason why it should have changed like that. People have claimed to see apparitions of multiple members of the family, usually Preston and Carrie. Preston is said to appear in the library and at the landing of the stairs inside. So that's what people say, which makes sense. The library was, dedicated to him. It's where he had a lot of his books. Preston was a very well-read person. Whenever I was going through the library, a lot of them belonged to him. It was really nice. I got to find books that were from the family, so I found like ones from Preston, I found them from Carrie, I found them from their son Amos, I found it from Amos's daughter Roxana. It was really cool. So obviously like they were a very well-read family because there were just so many books in there that had belonged to them at some point. So it makes sense to me that people would see an apparition of Preston in the library. And then as for the landing of the stairs, the master bedroom was up that way, so that's where it would be. And then people have reported seeing Carrie on this sun porch right here, which I know that people sometimes used to like be by that window, and I swear one time I was driving by as I was leaving after I was working, and I swear I saw somebody standing on the porch staring at me. I don't know who it was. It could have been a resident, it could have been something else, but it was unusual to say the least. The doors in her room, because that sunroom is attached to what eventually became her bedroom, those doors would actually like move by themselves. I'm not sure that there's actually a light in here anymore. Nope. Well, she started getting older. This is where Carrie lived. Would have been like her sitting parlor originally, but she had it converted into a bedroom as she got older and sicker and wasn't able to move those around as well. It's got like this really kind of unique little closet thing back here. And then it's also got a very interesting bathroom. I mean, this goes on to her sun porch here, where I saw a figure of some sort standing one time. I believe her daughter Mary was still living there at the time because Mary never got married. Her daughter Mary actually did a lot of work with like the Red Cross and such during the wars. That may have been part of the reason why she never got married, is because she was too busy, being involved in the community. I don't really know why she didn't get married. It's a bit unusual for the time period, but not immensely unusual. All of their other kids did get married though. Amos's wife was born on my birthday actually. Her name was Elva. They had a kid who may have painted a portrait of Preston that we have in the History Center now. We don't know for sure that it was Roxana that painted it. Fortunately, an archivist in Wyoming, her name is Joanna Wickman, she came down to do some research on Preston Plumb because she's writing a biography of him, and the board of her museum actually paid to restore it, and it looks absolutely beautiful now. But there's a little bit of a label, which part of it is missing, that says Senator Preston B. Plumb, donated by Mrs. Kindig, who would have been Amos's daughter Roxana. So it used to hang in the library. Now it's in the History Center. So this little section on the side here, there's office space with a vault, like a safe, I guess. I've always called it the vault. I don't know if it's actually a vault. It's a safe of some sort. It's got like a safe door on it, a really big metal one that you can allegedly lock. I don't think it was ever locked. This would have been Amos Plumb's office. When it was Plumb Place, it actually served as sort of a director's office of sorts. The director's office has moved several times. One of the cool and unique things about this office is that it actually has a whole vault that you can use. It's a really solid door, which also opens up into other doors that become a vault. And it's pretty empty now, but there were a lot of really interesting things in here. Whenever I was working here, I actually stored a lot of the historical artifacts and stuff that I found. One of my favorite things that I found was a pair of baby shoes, actually, which I believe to belong to their son, Thomas, the one who passed away when he was about 2. I don't have any confirmation on that, but kind of makes sense. But that was their son Amos's office. He was a pretty prominent businessman in Emporia, things with like mining and stuff like that. He also had the Building and Loan Association, I think it was called. There's a door that sort of leads into like this little hallway, because I believe that he was actually using this while the YWCA was still working there. I'm not for sure on that. I think he might have been, however. And there's a door on the hallway that would allow you to get in without having to go through the main building. After the office and then the hallway, there's this room that was called, I was told was the billiards room whenever I started. I'm not for sure that that's what it was used for. It would make sense. I don't know if it was used as the billiards room during the YWCA or whenever it was the family home. But it certainly could have been used as sort of a social gathering area. That I think it's either in the office or in the billiards room. There's a radiator in there still, which the radiators, they aren't connected. I was working there. It was fairly late in the evening, but all of a sudden the radiator just sounded like it turned on. I cannot think of anything that sounds like a radiator that could be explained by anything else. I mean, unless it was, something like maybe somebody turned on the water outside. That was the same night I smelled cigar smoke, actually, which really made no sense because there was a very strict no smoking policy in the building. So, yeah, you've got your stairs and your door right there, and then you've got your other door with no stairs. Yeah, mine was really more like weird noises or like seeing things out of the corner of my eye. Yeah, a lot of the stuff that I experienced here was more like sounds that I shouldn't be hearing necessarily, smells that were very out of place. One of the things that's purported to have happened is you can sometimes smell what is said to be Carrie Plum's perfume, especially if you're hanging out around her room, and I did experience that. I was just talking, I think it was the director. Like, there was nobody else around, and we just started smelling very flowery perfume, and it was very strange because neither one of us were wearing perfume. There's also supposed to be perhaps past residents that aren't just the Plumb family here as well. This is especially said to be true in some of the rooms back here, which were the residential rooms. Part of the folklore of ghosts in general is that they will, be attached to places where they've had a lot of emotions tied to, and it would totally make sense to me that if somebody was here using it as shelter, regardless of whether or not they died here, the emotional tie thing is true, then it absolutely makes sense to me that they would come back here. Oh, one time I got a really weird phone call while I was working here. It was the first time that I had ever, I've had this happen more times now, of course, and it could have just been a spam call, but it was the first time I ever got unknown number, unknown location on my phone, and I, just out of curiosity, I just decided to answer it, and it was very, very odd. It sounded like a man, like, not breathing directly into the phone, but like sort of like as if the phone was away from him, and then I could hear like what sounded like really metallic banging in the background, and then it just hung up.
That's weird.
It was really weird. Usually, you get spam calls, you just get dead silence or anything like that, or you start getting like the recorded voices, or like it's obviously a scam. I don't know that I've ever heard of anybody have anything that happened like that.
Yeah, because they just didn't say anything, just heavy breathing.
Just heavy breathing and metal banging. And again, the unknown number, unknown location thing was what really kind of freaked me out about that. Again, I've had that happen since, but that was the first time it had ever happened to me.
But have you ever had it happen to you again where it was accompanied by heavy breathing?
No, I have not. After that, I stopped answering potential spam calls. Ghosts will make you stop answering spam calls. That's a proven fact, according to me.
Maybe that's their goal.
If ghosts are real, they're trying to prevent spam calls.
That's their ultimate goal.
That's the ultimate goal. Even ghosts that are, died in the 1800s, they're here to stop spam calls. Maybe because they don't understand what cell phones are, or telephones in general, depending on when they died. I don't know when the telephone was invented. Like I said, I don't know for sure whether or not ghosts are real, but this sure is the place where I've had the most unexplained occurrences of things. Ooh, I just thought of something. One time my friend who was the director at the time was in their office, came into the office one day, and there were just faces on the computer. I don't know how to explain it, because it wasn't like they were like, we're not talking like somebody had pulled up pictures on the computer. There were like fingerprints and stuff all over the computer, which yeah, it could have been one of the residents, but the office was locked and the residents don't have a key to get in there. So there was also, I don't remember exactly what it was, but she was playing music that apparently the ghost did not like, so they started making the audio speaker go out. I don't remember what music it was. I think it might have been German opera. And they started making like the speakers go on the fritz, so she changed it to something else. Perfectly fine. Just didn't like the song, or didn't like the music, I guess. This is the residential part of it, and a lot of the residents would often report seeing like figures and stuff like that go by, and they didn't know who it was. Okay, I may have lied a little bit when I said that the phone call was the weirdest thing that happened. The weirdest thing that happened was the portrait of Beethoven appearing in the library. Okay, so the biggest part of what I did in there was I cataloged most of the books in the library. So like I knew all of the pictures that were in there, I knew all of the books, I knew where everything was in that library. library, and I just happened to walk into the library one day, and there was just a portrait of Beethoven hanging out there, and it was not like a small one, it was like a pretty nice sized one. I think they actually sold it at the auction, so if the person who bought that is watching this, post a picture, because I don't know where that came from, and nobody else did either. I talked to everybody who had been doing the rearranging, and they were like, yeah, I have no idea where that came from. I know I said the phone call was the weirdest thing. The phone call might have been the creepiest thing that happened, but the portrait of Beethoven was definitely the weirdest thing that happened. There's also some pretty interesting folklore that surrounds not the house itself, but the Plumb family. A good majority of the Plumb family is buried in Maplewood. Top of Preston's grave, there is this huge boulder, and the story goes, apparently this boulder was from Colorado, where Carrie saw Preston kissing another woman on the boulder, and so whenever he died, she brought the boulder back to keep him in his place. Not true. Not true in the slightest. There's actually a newspaper article from, I think, like the 1910s or something like that, that talks about Preston had wanted this, for some reason Preston had wanted this boulder, this exact type of grave marker. So Carrie searched for years to find it, and eventually some place in, I think it was Vermont, contacted her, and they had it shipped all the way here and placed on top of the grave. So no, to our knowledge, Preston was not having an affair with another woman, and he wasn't making out with another woman on this boulder. He just wanted a big boulder for his grave marker. I don't know why, he just did. A lot of the other grave markers in that cemetery are actually boulders. Not as big as his boulder, but they're still like boulders, and that's something that I find quite unique and interesting. This folklore story, I guess, sort of, you know, created something of a trend. All but...
My God, a person just totally fed us through that window.
Was it a real person or like a ghost person?
Sure, it was a real person, but it was mighty scary. I don't think I got it on camera, but...
Yay, not a ghost. But also, boo, not a ghost?
I don't know.
I don't know. 3 of his kids, his 3 youngest, actually moved to California. So his daughter Ruth, daughter Carrie, and then their other son Preston moved to California. Ruth and Preston are both buried in California. Carrie, their daughter, was actually brought back to Emporia after she died, and she's buried right behind her parents, actually. Their daughter Mary, their son Thomas, the one who died when he was about 2 years old, are buried next to their parents, and then Amos is buried like sort of diagonally across from them. Part of their family still lives in California today. I didn't get to meet him, but when my friend who was the director here at the time was working here, she actually got to meet Eric Plumb, who's a direct descendant. I think they're up to like Preston Plumb the 4th now. That was pretty cool. He said that he was just passing through and just wanted to stop by and see the house. I haven't gone that far into their genealogy because I do feel a little weird looking into current alive people. So I'm much more interested in dead people, which sounds so weird to say. That's normal sentences to say. I think my other favorite thing about the Plumb family is the biography of Preston Plumb. I think it's just called The Life of Preston B. Plumb by William Connolly. He did not get along with the family at all. I don't know whether it was them who approached him to write it or he who approached them, but either way, the family wanted a lot of input, and it sounded like at first he was okay with it. And then at some point, about a year or so before the biography was published, they had a falling out. There are some very, very nasty notes from Connolly that I've been shown by Joanna, which I will not repeat here because they are mean. They are mean notes about how he really didn't like Carrie or Amos. This would be Carrie Plumb, not their daughter Carrie, and that they were super controlling. I'm not a huge fan of that biography either. It's very dry, and I've read a lot of dry biographies in my time, and this one was probably the driest. But it does provide a lot of good information about, you know, sort of the things that Preston did while he was a senator, while he was in the war. One of the things I think that the family had a falling out with over Connolly is they did not want Connolly to project current day politics onto Preston. They were like, you can't say that he would be in support of this because you don't really know, which I think is really fair. I think that's a huge thing in history that keeps happening, is we're like, well, this historical figure wouldn't want this. They're dead. We don't know what they would want. It's kind of ridiculous to rely on what dead people would want, you know, 50 years after they're dead. I guess in this case it was like 20 for Preston, but still, you know, at least a couple decades. A lot can change in 20 years. I would know. I'm almost 24, and lots changed. Yeah. So much.
You okay?
No. That's why you shouldn't project things onto historical figures, because so much can change in the span of, you know, years and decades, that you shouldn't try to apply modern day, well, most of the time you shouldn't try to apply modern day ideas to, you know, historical figures, because like you don't know. Like, I mean, sure, you can make conjecture and stuff like that, but you're not gonna know, because first of all, you're not that person. They're dead. They died before this thing even happened. Preston Plum wouldn't even know what a never even learned about the internet. Internet wasn't a thing in the 1800s. Internet was barely a thing in the 1900s, to be honest. So yeah, the family had a big falling out with Connolly about the sort of the projecting of modern day politics onto this. Like, Preston Plum would have been in support of this. How do you know? You've been talking to him from beyond the grave there, Connolly? Maybe he was.
Someone's got a Ouija board.
Oh, maybe he did have a Ouija. I don't know when Ouija boards were invented. I'm gonna look that up. When were Ouija boards? I'm not the first person who's Googled this. 1890. So yeah, he could have been. The first patent was filed, with the issue date on the patent was February 10th, 1891. So Ouija boards existed before Preston died, not by much, but they did exist. All right, new theory. Connolly had a Ouija board, and that's how he knew that Preston Plum would be in support of these things. I'm Mr. History, and I approve this message. I don't approve this message. I don't think he had a Ouija board. Regardless, it did not make the family very happy at all. So they had a huge falling out. It's a really interesting read of a biography, because like it really is just like, here are his accomplishments in life. Not a whole lot about him as a person, just his accomplishments. And it's still something like 300 pages long, which I guess tells you a lot about how many accomplishments and stuff that he did. Almost all newspapers in Kansas, it looked like, covered his obituary. And again, he was unanimously elected by the state legislature. That's not easy to accomplish. I mean, he was well liked enough that somebody based a character in a play off of him. It's called The Senator. I don't remember what the ancestor's name was, but one of the ancestors of Drew Barrymore was in that play. And apparently he really liked the play, and the play was eventually made into a silent film.
I don't even want to look in the windows.
Yeah, the windows are where, like, I saw a lot of people being like, oh yeah, I saw faces in the windows, and I was like, well, I mean, you know, people do live here. No, people have seen like straight up full body apparitions before though, so that's pretty unique. They saw what appears to be a red-headed lady, so they've actually got like some pretty good evidence. They have a lot of pictures of like orbs and stuff like that too. And the only place I really didn't like investigating was the basement, and that's just because that basement, there's also a lot of spiders in the basement. I don't like spiders. I did see a snake one time though. It was a garter snake, so it wasn't like a poisonous snake, but it sure was a snake. Yeah, I've had other interesting things there too that weren't just ghost related. Like one time my friend and I were upstairs in the ballroom because I found an old steamer trunk, and we spent like 3 hours trying to open it, and eventually we did, and it was just full of Hobby Lobby yarn. I'm pretty sure this was before Hobby Lobby even came to Emporia as well, so like I got a lot of questions there. That trunk was really hard to get into because the lock had completely rusted shut, which makes me wonder how they got the Hobby Lobby yarn in there in the first place. I forget how big it is, because like I know how big it is like on the outside, right? But that does not translate to how massive it is on the inside. Yeah, so the house itself has just gone through several transitions. You know, it was a family house, then it was the YWCA, then a community center, and then like a shelter of transitional housing. I think that one of my favorite things is that the front half of the building is still pretty historically accurate, I would say, as much as it can be for, you know, having to have gone through repairs and everything, and, you know, like bring things up to code. A lot of like the light fixtures, as far as I know, are, you know, original to the house, or as original as they can be. You know, they probably didn't have electric refrigerators. Gonna guess that probably didn't exist in this house whenever they first lived there. I don't think that's a stretch to say. But it's very interesting to me how the front half of the house still, you know, like even though there were residential, a lot of the bedrooms were actually turned into residence rooms and such. It still really has sort of retained a lot of that, I guess, historical charm to me, especially whenever I'm in places like the library or in Carrie's room or some of the other rooms in the front half of the building. Even though, you know, like they're painted more modern colors, and, you know, like there's definitely clearly been updates and stuff like that. It just holds on on to a lot of that nice historic charm. Like, you can totally 100% see a family living here. It was some form of safe space for women for almost 100 years, because the YWCA opened up in 1921 and they closed in 2020. So, and I believe it was the mid 50s or so, there were actually some people who wanted to tear Plumb Place down because they said that it wasn't serving the original mission that it had been set to. At some point they turned the deed into, like, it's supposed to be a YWCA, and once it stops being a YWCA, you know, like, the deed, the will has been broken. There was a big community uproar about it, so there are petitions that I found in letters from her kids, her kids that were still alive at this point, who said, no, we like it being the community center, we would like for it to continue to be the community center. This was a very publicly supported place. I think a lot of people really appreciated what it provided to the community. I think it's contributed to the history of Emporia and Lyon County in ways that a lot of people really don't understand. Not only in terms of the spookiness factor of it, but just in terms of the fact that this is a family home of one of our founders.